Now, in addition to doing this, we can also do multiple compositions. So let's say that we had something like if f of g of, I'll bring purple into play here, h of x. So now we've got 3 layers here. Let's say that that equals cosine squared 5x minus 2. Now the first thing to note is that we need to rewrite this. This means cosine squared of 5x minus 2, which is the same thing as cosine of 5x minus 2, that whole thing squared. Oh, our directions are to identify f of x, g of x, and h of x. This is the same thing as writing f of g of h of x equals cosine 5x minus 2 whole thing squared. So we're going to have 3 different functions to pick out. Let's just start at the outside and work our way in. The first or biggest box function that we see is that we see a squared power function. So that means that this whole thing right here, that's all a box. And if we're working on our most outside level, f of x, we're just talking about something squared. But what makes this different is that when we come to look at the inside function, notice that we still have a box function. Inside is cosine 5x minus 2. But cosine is a trigonometric function. It has a box itself. So that means our next layer, we've already taken out f, so our next layer is g. That's cosine of something, g of x is cosine of x. Now h of x is purple, it's the inmost layer here. So we're looking at what's inside the final box. This is just 5x minus 2, so h of x equals 5x minus 2. Go ahead and try this yourself on the next problem. If f of g of h of x equals e to the sine of 4x, find f of x, g of x, and h of x. Okay, pause the video, go ahead and try that. Okay, so working from the outside, we want to make the biggest box possible. We know an exponential function is a box function, so we've got one box right here. This is e to the box, so that means that f of x is e to the x. Now, inside we've got a sine of 4x. Again, there's a box function. Our next layer is blue, it's g of x. So we've got a sine box. So that means g of box equals sine of box, or g of x equals sine of x. And then finally, inside that last box, we've got a 4x, so h of x equals 4x. And there we have identified the three. If we were to go the other way and compose them all in, h of x would go into sine of x, so it would be sine of 4x. Sine of 4x would go into e to the x, so it would be e to the sine of 4x, which is what we started with. Sometimes it can be hard to tell whether or not you have multiple functions. So here's one thing to be really aware of. If you draw a box and only x is in it, it doesn't need its own function. So for example, let's say y equals 3x squared plus 4 all to the 5th power. And I'm not telling you about the f of x's and the g of x's and all that sort of thing here, because I don't want it to be clear yet on how many functions are in here, how many functions are composed. So the directions are going to be to define the functions that have been composed. That's what we've been doing before. And also to rewrite the right side of the equation using function notation. So what that means is basically you take something like this and you make it look something like that, the f of g of blah blah blah. Okay, so let's break this down. Let's see, y equals 3x squared plus 4 to the 5th power. So we're looking for the largest box we can draw. We see a power function right there. So we do have an outside. That's box to the 5th. So let's define that as f. We could call it anything we wanted, but f is fine. F of x equals x to the 5th. And then we also have an inside here. (3x squared plus 4). Now notice here is another power function right there. But if I draw my box, notice how there's only x in it. If there's only x, then it doesn't need to have its own function. So rather than doing anything with it, this is just our endpoint. So let's mark here only x, so doesn't need its own function. So in this case, we've got one outside function and one inside function. So that's just like these ones that we were doing earlier. F of g of x. We're going to define this as f of g of x equals 3x squared plus 4 to the 5th power. So this, and this are all part of our answer. Let's have you check your understanding for this on a similar problem. If y equals 4 to the tangent of x, define the functions that have been composed and rewrite the right side of the equation with function notation. Okay, pause the video, try that one, and restart the video when you're ready. Our biggest box function is right here. We have 4 to the box. Let's call that f of x, or f of box. So there's our outside function. We've got an inside function, tangent of x. Now notice that we do have a box function here, but only x is inside it, so we don't need our own function. We can just stop there. That can be g of x. And once again, we have f of g of x equals 4 tangent of x.